Nissan's NV400 offers a versatile and practical choice to those looking for a large van. With a huge choice of body styles, load volumes and options, plus an efficient set of Euro 5 compliant diesel engines, it's a class act.
Nissan has big plans for vans. Previously a minor player in the LCV sector, the Japanese company's influence in this segment has been growing slowly over the last few years, following the well-received launch of the compact but surprisingly spacious NV200 model in 2010. Now this was all Nissan's own work, but to develop the largest model in its LCV lineup, the Japanese brand has turned to its traditional partners Vauxhall and Renault to create this, the NV400. So what we have here is Nissan's version of Renault's Master and Vauxhall's Movano, with all three makers targeting key players in the segment for the largest size of working van. That means models like larger Ford Transits, the Iveco Daily, and two designs that really dominate this part of the European market. First, there's the vehicle that we know as either the Volkswagen Crafter or the Mercedes Sprinter. And up against it is the design variously badged as either the Fiat Ducato, the Citroën Relay or the Peugeot Boxer. Plenty of competition then, but this NV400 is well equipped to meet it. If you've tried the Renault and Vauxhall versions of this design, then you'll already know that this is a very competitive platform indeed, up with the class leaders when it comes to practicality and running costs. To this, the NV400 adds sharp pricing, distinctive looks, a huge range of model options and some clever high-tech gadgetry. Will it all be enough? Let's find out. I always look forward to driving a particularly large van. You sit higher up than you would in any SUV, bearing down on other road users with purpose. And that's particularly true in this NV400, which seats you in a loftier position even than its predecessor, the Interstar, offering a view ahead that's even more commanding thanks to revisions to both the windscreen and the side windows. Under the bonnet, the engine choice is the same. It's a direct injection 4-cylinder 2.3 litre DCI diesel, but you do get to choose your power output, either 100, 125 or 150 brake horsepower, and there's the choice of either front or rear wheel drive. Those engines are a pretty willing bunch, with even the entry-level 100 brake horsepower version able to put out 285 Newton meters of torque through the 6-speed manual gearbox. There's also a robotized semi-automatic transmission if you want it. Now that's a torque figure that the top 150 brake horsepower variant extends to 350 Newton meters. That's quite some pulling power. It's enough to tug a trailer with a braked towing weight of 3 tons. It's also enough to deal with gross vehicle weights that range from 2.8 to 3.3 tons on to 3.5 tons, which is what I've got here, and they top out at 4.5 tons. Now that means payload capacities that can be anything from 1,030 kilograms to 2,254 kilograms. Now, as operators will know, if you opt for a variant with a gross vehicle weight of over 3.5 tons, you'll need to fit a tachograph, which of course will limit the amount of time that the vehicle can spend on road. On the move, though the gearbox could be slicker and the engine a little quieter, you're immediately impressed by this van's composure, both around corners and over poor surfaces. Rear-wheel drive makes it especially manoeuvrable. It's true that the steering is a little on the light side for motorway work, but you'll appreciate that when it comes to threading this big van through tight city streets. And when it comes to exercising a relatively tight turning circle, which on entry-level versions can be as tight as 12 meters. Aware that they would need to share Renault and Vauxhall underpinnings for this design, Nissan went to particular trouble to style their version differently. And sure enough, this NV400 does have a very distinctive look. The styling was completed by Nissan Design Europe in Paddington, and the engineering by Nissan's Technical Centre in Bedfordshire. So there's certainly been a very much UK-based approach to the whole thing. Thick bumpers add aggression to the front end, curling up at the edges to protect the corners of the vehicle from knocks, and they incorporate steps that are cut in so that you can easily climb up to clean the windscreen if you need to. Side rubbing strips along the flanks are also a boon. And inside, well, the cabin isn't anything too exciting, but the stubby gear lever that sprouts from the fascia falls easily to hand amidst the usual sea of tough and durable elephant grey plastics. Now, there isn't the kind of soft touch, granite build quality that you'll get in more expensive Mercedes and Volkswagen rivals. But what this interior lacks in tactile feel, it more than makes up for with practical touches. Now, both the seat and the wheel can be height adjustable, and there's a simply enormous number of different storage compartments around the cab, literally about 150 litres of total storage space. Everything from decently sized door bins to various compartments and cubbies, a chilled glove box, lots of space for cans and bottles. There's a compartment on the centre top dash for a laptop, room for your sunglasses, and also a very useful overhead shelf. Now, this is not only a higher quality cabin than anything that this model's predecessor, the old Interstar, could offer, but it's also a bigger interior than anything that Nissan has previously offered in this segment, and that means that there's more room for 3 people inside, though the centre occupants' knees and legs are going to be slightly compromised by these 2 compartments here. There's also slightly less padding for the centre seat. But of course, most of the time you won't be using it anyway, and you'll be able to fold it down to create a very helpful workstation, which is very useful in between appointments for taking laptops and things. There's also a couple of cup holders on the back of it. Unfortunately, the swivelling centre part, which is a very neat idea, only turns towards the driver and not the front seat passenger. Other slightly irritating touches, well, there aren't too many, but this grab handle is slightly awkwardly placed above the door opening rather than on the pillar here. And I'd like to see some of the really neat design features on the standard tally rather than on the options list. Now, these include storage compartments beneath the front seat bases and a very neat fold-out screen for the Nissan Connect by TomTom SatNav, which is able to guide you real-time around jams and give you both MP3 and Bluetooth connectivity. Prices range in the £20,000 to £30,000 bracket, which is about par for the course for this class of large van, and as you'd expect, it's about the same amount that you'll be paying for this model's design stablemates, the Vauxhall Movano and the Renault Master. It's also a similar amount to the budget required for the competitive Peugeot Boxer, Citroën Relay and Fiat Ducato design, as well as the amount that you probably need if you were considering a larger Ford Transit. There is a slight saving, though, if you opt for this vehicle over, say, a Mercedes Sprinter or a Volkswagen Crafter. Nissan can supply a huge array of NV400 variants, as well as the usual panel vans and combis. The brand can also supply crew vans, box bodies, drop sides and tippers, as well as a range of chassis cab options for specialist bodybuilders, all built in-house. Most customers, though, will want a simple van. Now, those going for front-wheel drive will be looking to pay, well, between £21,000 and £27,000. If you opt for a rear-wheel drive, as I have here, then you're looking at needing a budget of between £26,000 and £30,000. Now, that front or rear-wheel drive decision is an important one for NV400 buyers to make. The advantages of front-wheel drive are that you'll get a lower curb weight, so you can expect a higher payload. You also get improved fuel economy and a lower frame height. Now, if you go for rear-wheel drive, well, the advantages are that you've got a wider choice when it comes to chassis cab conversions, and thanks to the greater rear axle capacity, you've got really a better vehicle for medium duty applications, really heavier work. If you do go for rear-wheel drive, then you've got a choice of either single or paired rear wheels on each side at the back. Next, you've to choose your preferred power output from the 2.3 litre DCI diesel engine. Now, front-wheel drive customers have an entry-level 100 bhp version, but otherwise it's a choice of either 125 or 150 bhp, whether you go front or rear-wheel drive. Now, next up, you've got to choose your gross vehicle weight. Here I've got the 3.5 tonne version. Below this, I could have opted for either 2.8 or 3.3 tonnes, and above it, there's also a 4.5 tonne alternative. Now, having made that choice, I've got to choose my roof height, either H1, H2 or H3. I've got to select between 3 different wheelbases and 4 different lengths, L1, L2, L3 and L4. As for equipment, well, you'll need to read the fine print since a number of the convenience features are optional. You don't mind paying extra though for really useful design, a good example of which is the Nissan Connect by TomTom sat-nav setup with its neat overhead fold-down screen. Now, as well as conventional route guidance and mapping and planning, this system also gives owners the option to subscribe to the TomTom live service content, which gives them live HD traffic updates, fixed and mobile speed camera warnings, weather forecasts, and access to Google local search. And that's an up-to-date contacts database that lists literally millions of contact details for all kinds of local services and businesses. And if you're doing multi-drops, then that system could be worth its weight in gold. Now, whichever NV400 model you choose, you can expect to find features like a CD stereo, electric front windows, power heated mirrors, remote central locking, Bluetooth compatibility via mobile phone, anti-lock brakes, a driver's airbag and a full height steel bulkhead. If you're mainly city-based, then you might want to consider the option of a robotised version of the manual gearbox to save yourself all that left foot clutch work. Of the 4 vehicle lengths, L1, L2 and L3 are produced for front-wheel drive customers, while L3 and L4 are for the needs of rear-wheel drive buyers. There are 3 different body heights, H1, H2 and H3, and of course it's your choice between these options that will determine the cubic capacities, the amount that you can carry, which can range between, well, 8 and 14.8 cubic metres if you go for a front-wheel drive model, and anything between 12.4 and 17 cubic metres if you go for a rear-wheel drive model. Though if you opt for your rear-wheel drive model with a Luton conversion, your capacity could be anything up to 22 cubic metres. Now, that kind of carriage capacity can mean a lot of weight, so it's just as well perhaps that an extra gross vehicle weight option of 4.5 tonnes has been added to the top of the NV400 model range, slotting in above the more familiar 2.8, 3.3 and 3.5 tonne gross vehicle weight alternatives. Now that means payload capacities that can be anything between 1,030 and 2,254 kilograms. And at the business end, well, there are the usual twin side-hinged rear doors that, as normal, open out to 180 degrees, but can be specified to open out to as much as 270 degrees. As for getting stuff in, well, it helps that there's a relatively low loading height. Now, it can be as little as 562 millimetres from the ground in front-wheel drive derivatives. It'll be about 100 millimetres higher than that if you've gone for a rear-wheel drive model. Now, it helps here that there's a wide door aperture of 1,580 millimetres. Now, once you have got your stuff inside, then you've got a decent amount of loading height. It can be anything from 1,627 millimetres to 1,724 millimetres, depending, of course, upon the body height that you've chosen. Now, there's plenty of interior width, either 1,765 millimetres if you're measuring side to side, or 1,080 millimetres if you're measuring between the wheel arches. As you'd expect, there's a sliding side door, now usefully wider than it was in the previous generation model, offering an opening that from H2 derivative upwards is at least 1,270 millimetres wide. Now, to prevent heavier items from sliding forward and ending up in the cab with you, there's a standard full-height bulkhead fitted across the range. And to make that eventuality even less likely, you've got numerous tie-down hooks fitted around the floor area. There are as many as 14 of these in some derivatives. Now, also fitted across the range is a useful shelf above the full-height bulkhead that's accessible only from the load area back here. And it's very helpful for storing things like bungee cords and tie-down hooks. But will this Euro 5 2.3 litre DCI diesel engine be cheap to run? Well, judge for yourself. Most models should achieve anything between 30 and 33 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, and that'll give you an operating range of up to 840 miles if you opt for the largest 105 litre fuel tank. CO2 returns should hover between 214 and 260 grams per kilometre, depending on the particular variant and engine you choose. As for maintenance costs, well, they've been reduced by up to 40%, thanks to service intervals set at every 25,000 miles or 2 years, brake pads and discs that last up to 20% longer, engine coolant that lasts for up to 100,000 miles or every 6 years, and a timing chain guaranteed for life. As a result, Nissan reckons that an average business user could save themselves up to £1,500 every 120,000 miles or 4 years, compared to the costs they would have incurred in running the previous generation model. The warranty you get is 3 years or 100,000 miles. It makes sense to buy a really large LCV. After all, specify one of these correctly and it could carry most of what you need a smoky full-size lorry to shift. And even if you don't have huge loads to carry all of the time, running cost advances in this market segment mean that it won't really cost you much more to run something like this than would be required to operate a van from the next segment down, say something Volkswagen Transporter or Vauxhall Vivaro sized. However you specify it, this NV400 will give you a lot more carriage capacity than something like that. But then you could say that of any large van. This one, though, gives itself a fighting chance in this tight market segment, thanks to sharp pricing, clever design and thoughtful equipment provision. The Nissan Connect by TomTom sat-nav setup, for example, might easily sell you this vehicle all on its own. This then is the substance to this Japanese maker's claim to a much bigger slice of the LCV market. And on this showing, it's a claim that rivals are going to have to take very seriously indeed.